Hi pals, it's me, Artie, them pronouns only, and this week's video are Casualty autism baiting me. So I made this video like over a year ago at this point, where I talk about some of my headcanon autistic characters from new and old media that I enjoy, and Dylan from Casualty was one of those. I've been watching Casualty for like maybe 6 years with my mum, and roughly like 3 or 4 years ago was when I started questioning my own neurotypical status and felt pretty comfortable with the idea that I'm autistic. It is now official, by the way. And like, yeah, Dylan in particular really stood out to me. I wonder why. I relate to him quite a lot. He's, you know, very, very serious about his job. I mean, he literally should be. He's a fucking doctor. He's clearly well experienced, well studied in his area, plus he seems to know quite a lot outside of his typical area of medicine as well. He's moody, he's miserable, direct, not great at like the whole social thing, but also he does try and is often better with his patients directly than he is with the typical social aspect. He's not great at eye contact, he's not great at expressing emotions, particularly on his face, and his best friend in the entire world is his dog, Dervla. I would say I am quite similar to this man. You know, minus the alcoholism, minus that part. So on April 6th, 2024 at 8:35 p.m, series 38, episode titled Childhood's End, had me screaming, crying and throwing up when the new medical lead, who I mentioned in my BPT video by the way, just straight up asked Dylan when he's going to get officially assessed. And Dylan doesn't know what for. And Patrick is just like, autism. He also says Asperger's, but... And it has been so many weeks, months even, since this first episode, and next to no information has been shared since. So I'm wondering, are they autism baiting me? Much like queer baiting, but with Dylan, because they accidentally wrote a character that reads autistic to many of its viewers, and it's now trendy to be autistic, and it's now like a thing to work out that you're autistic later on in your life. In the initial episode, the interaction between Dylan and Patrick went like this. Patrick says, "There's a problem, I need to get ahead of it." Dylan, "Am I the problem?" Patrick, "No, but I think you have one, so I think we should attack it head on. So how can I help? Have you considered a proper diagnosis? Putting a name on it?" Dylan, "Sorry, you've lost me. A diagnosis of what?" Patrick, "Autism, Asperger's. You're on the spectrum. That's been plain to everyone for some time. The obsessions you have, the hyperfixations, whatever you were on about earlier with coincidences, communication difficulties, abrasive relationships." Dylan then butts in, "Sorry, can I stop you before you get any more offensive?" Slay. Patrick, "I'm just saying." Dylan, "Firstly, the diagnosis of Asperger's was retired by the DSM-5 in 2013. Probably something to do with the fact that Asperger was a Nazi." Slay. Genuinely can't believe they fucking said that on Casualty, which is a BBC show. Genuinely a little bit surprised by that. Patrick, "You're right. Apologies. ASD then." Dylan, "Secondly, and most importantly, how patronising. Even if I were autistic," slay, he said, used autistic, not person first language, slay, "it wouldn't stop me being a perfectly good doctor," also slay. Something I've discussed before. Patrick, "Well, something's stopping you." Personally, I think it could be capitalism, the Tories, the general collapse of British society, the collapse of the NHS. I think any of those are probably the reason before it's the autism. And yeah, I also talked about this in my Grey's Anatomy video, about the autistic doctor, Dr. Dixon, and the barriers to being a doctor or like any kind of healthcare professional if you're disabled or specifically autistic. And I had some interesting comments on that video which were very telling of the neurotypicals in healthcare. And then a scene later, Dylan has to tell the family of a patient that the patient is unlikely to wake from a coma. He does tell them, and the son is very aggressive, you know, like, I get it, it was a really shit situation overall, that's kind of irrelevant to the point here. And Dylan just like actually cannot look at this man in the face or eyes, like at all. He then goes to Patrick's office, puts his badge, card, ID, whatever it is, on the desk, and Patrick goes, meaning? Dylan says, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't think I should try. Patrick then says, no, hang on. We are dying on our feet here, Dylan. You can't just walk out. As if he wasn't like just basically threatening his job anyway because of autism. Like, okay. And Dylan says, well, I can't be here. Good. You know your boundaries, get out. Patrick then tries to emotionally manipulate him into staying, and saying that it's not enough to let his patients down, but he has to let the whole department down too. And Dylan still just fucking walks out. And I'm like, slay. As you should, Dylan. This kind of is weaved in and out of like other plot lines where there's no Dylan. So there's no Dylan for a while. It seems like most of the other staff have no idea where he is, that he's seemingly quit. And Stevie, who's another doctor, has to pick up the slack, but no one gave her any warning either for that. And then the end of that episode, called Into the Fire, Stevie goes to talk to him at his home, partly due to Faith, who's a higher level nurse, saying like this is very unlike Dylan to just not be showing up to work. P.S. He did give notices / say that he wasn't coming in. It's Patrick who has not told anyone else that Dylan has said that. And that's part of that plotline between Dylan and Patrick, is that Patrick spends much of his time in the job basically making everybody else around him look incompetent, particularly somewhat more marginalised people, from Dylan, who is possibly autistic, to Rash and I can't remember if... definitely Rash, but possibly also Rita, who are both Muslim Asian people. He is going after the whistleblower, even though that's literally fucking illegal, but like happens all the time. Right? Brighton Hospital? Right, Brighton County?
Allegedly.
Happens a lot, actually. So like that's kind of, that whole plot line is, that's part of that, trying to just make everybody else look like they are suddenly incapable of doing their jobs. What's the correlating thing that's changed? Well, a new annoying man in charge. So yeah, Stevie visits Dylan at his houseboat. And she says, I like it. Looking around at the houseboat. What's this? She picks up a bottle of alcohol of some kind. I don't know shit, so I'm not even going to try to pretend I know what it is. I guess whiskey. Who knows? Dylan says, I haven't opened that yet. Stevie says, okay. She then picks up and reads through some of the documents on the table underneath the bottle. And she says, this is a deep dive, Dylan. Dylan then responds, wouldn't be here if I'd read them earlier. He basically lost a patient to a very rare complication that was being displayed in a very rare way as well. Stevie says, you know you shouldn't be kicking yourself for a 1 in 10,000 event. Dylan says, but it wasn't just one, was it? There was another patient that died completely avoidably. This is then also part of that previous plot with Patrick, that Patrick is basically the one who's causing a lot of deaths in the department, and somehow making it look like everybody else because he's not the treating doctor and he's not writing his name on when he treats patients. And then they die or get even like more ill. So that's kind of the gist of what that's about. Stevie says, no, hold on, you can't blame yourself for those deaths. We all know it takes more than one person to make a mistake. Dylan says, if you're going to go into a Swiss cheese argument, please don't. You wouldn't have missed a penicillin allergy, would you? I wouldn't expect that of even a first year. Stevie then says, speaking of which, you missed your teaching earlier. Apparently the deanery is pissed off. Dylan says, I know, they rang. Stevie says, you checked they had a penicillin allergy, right? And Dylan says, well, that's the point. I don't know. I just assume the patients are safe with me, but perhaps they're not. Perhaps I've been relying on muscle memory, which I do think is like a good reflection generally for doctors to have. Like, am I just relying too much on what I'm used to? And am I missing things I really should be paying more attention to? However, this is a bit more unfounded because it's literally none of this was his fault, which they work out in a few episodes' time. Stevie then says, no, Dylan, you don't assume anything. Kind of an autistic slang. You're one of the most focused people I know. Dylan says, but what if the focus is a sign that I'm on the spectrum? And I feel a bit sad that he didn't just say autistic again like the first episode. It's almost like, depending on who's writing the episodes, changes how people refer to autism, which is really annoying. Really annoying. Stevie then also seems a little taken aback by that comment, as I don't think it's been shared generally at all with anybody else. So I don't think she even knew this was what was going on for him. So she says, all right, so it's a sign you're on the spectrum, or I don't know, it's a sign that, like all of us, you have a unique personality. Like I said, I think that Stevie and Dylan are very similar. Dry, deadpan, sarcastic humour, kind of abrasive, not super likeable to a lot of people. She says, whatever sign or symptom of your focus is... The sentence makes no sense. Whatever sign or symptom that the focus is linked to, it's what makes him a frustratingly amazing doctor. Dylan says, well, I'm getting tested because 2 patients have died back to back on my watch, and there is nothing worse, Stevie, than feeling like you are not safe. And I don't feel that I am safe because I'm not safe. Stevie then says, okay, then talk me through it, all of it, case by case. She decides to stay and let him talk through everything that happened and his research. I think she does this to help him process and be a sounding board and sort of give her thoughts on what she would have done, etc. Because she's also one of the like really highly skilled and experienced doctors. And I think they've just generally been in similar positions before. So yeah, generally, Dylan's results are not disclosed, but they are brought up a few more times in following episodes by Patrick or by Dylan himself. However, the plot is more focused on Dylan and Stevie banding together to keep tabs on Patrick to get rid of him due to negligence and lacking in any actual like medical skill needed for his job role, at least hands-on job role. He can go and do the admin stuff and keep out of everyone's business, but he doesn't want to. They eventually get him out, but much of the experience between Dylan and Patrick is very clear, like Darvo gaslighting, attempts against Dylan, and that if he is autistic, he could lose his job under the guise that it makes him dangerous. Patrick had often somehow managed to cover up and blame his fuck-ups on other people. Many of them were Dylan's patients or like someone that Dylan was overseeing's patient. So Dylan was associated to many of these patients somehow. And an article came out in the Metro recently, in real life, where the actor for Dylan was interviewed and they specifically brought up the autism plotline. The article does quite a good job, including certain terms like autistic rather than with autism, etc., like other fluffifications, as well as disclosing interesting statistics like in a population-based study by the University College London, UCL, in 2023, researchers estimated there may be between 150,000 and 500,000 people aged 20 to 49 in England who are autistic but have not received a diagnosis. So, the actor William Beck told me that while he was looking forward to exploring this side of Dylan, the autistic side, he recognised the sensitivity surrounding putting a spotlight on an adult living with autism, never mind, without previously receiving a diagnosis. William Beck says, "I knew it was going to be very important to bear in mind that each individual is an individual first and foremost." Yes, accurate, well done. And very, very rarely, I think, would people choose to define themselves by a diagnosis. Iffy statement. Dylan, I would say that would be particularly true of him, and yet he was confronted by this obligation to examine this thing that he had probably put to the back of his mind. Again, it's about remembering that Dylan is Dylan. He's a good doctor, he's got to go to work, and he's got to get it done. This stuff, it's like the weight of a storyline cooking away in the background. In our show, it sometimes bubbles away for a few episodes and then it gets examined. For this, it's been bubbling away and it's like there's a monkey on his back. He's got to feed it, but he doesn't want to. Then when you get to the point where he takes the monkey off his back and wrestles with it, the answer is more complicated than you would have thought. The answer is far more nuanced, and hopefully that's the bit people recognise. It's not the specifics of saying, well, this is how it is for people. It's saying, first and foremost, it's about you. This very last statement, I think, is good and appropriate because, yes, we all say, you know, if you've met one autistic person, then you've met one autistic person. But there is obviously going to be a lot of similarities because, like, isn't that the point of a diagnosis? The same handful of things are disabling to autistic people, you know, like as like a basic summary. He added, "We live in a society now where we are psychologically literate and psychiatrically literate. Literate in terms of mental health in a way that no generation before us has been. As such, we're forced to confront things. There's a lot of talk in mental health about spectrums, and I think that that's the key to understanding it. A spectrum is infinite possibilities to satisfy some, or I suppose none, of those diagnostics. We're all on there somewhere. The point is to hopefully offer those people who have come to that realisation later on that we're all on there somewhere." And like, this is erring awfully close to, we're all a little bit autistic, which I'm not keen on. Like, yes, many autistic struggles are neurotypical or generally like allistic struggles too, but the reason it's a whole diagnosis is because it's so much of a struggle, it's disruptive. Like, that's why it's a diagnosis and not just, we're all like that. We're not. The article then says the storyline came to a conclusion when Dylan read the result of his autism test. How is that a conclusion, babes? That's a cliffhanger. That's literally a cliffhanger. We didn't find anything out. That's a cliffhanger. We're waiting to find out. We are hanging on for dear fucking life to find out what the answer was. I just wanted to throw this in there real quick as well. Yes, I pulled this from Wiki, but honestly, this is like basically it. A cliffhanger or cliffhanger ending is a plot device in fiction which features a main character in a precarious or difficult dilemma, or confronted with a shocking revelation at the end of an episode or a film of serialized fiction. I don't know why that was necessary. A cliffhanger is hoped to incentivize an audience to return to see how the characters resolve the dilemma. I feel like them leaving us with Dylan not stating what the report said is literally just a cliffhanger to keep the audience, or a particular part of their audience, likes to stick around, because like I said, there's been like no fucking Dylan for ages, or if there is Dylan, no autism. So like, ugh. For Will, he confirmed that he would be intrigued to look at this further, but knows it would all depend on timings as well. I think it depends on what happens to him. There are, of course, situations where the storyline can be re-examined of itself, but the way the storyline was introduced was really just a helper to the Patrick Dillon story. That is where things of delicacy are best examined as part of another storyline. I don't disagree with that, but sometimes it gives you the chance to wear it lightly. I think there's every opportunity for it to be re-examined, but it would have to be at the right time. To me personally, this is where we meet the same old issue in media where it comes to disability, when it comes to disability, that disability is almost always a plot device. Like, this was how I felt about Wolf Country, the book. It's always a plot device to service another plot rather than its own plot. Like, sure, I think the way it came out was an interesting way for it to begin, but to me, that's all it was. A beginning. There is so much possibility for Dylan's character to dive deeper into exploring being autistic as a doctor, being autistic as an alcoholic, the whys of his life and behaviour, the connection he had to his dog versus everybody else, the privilege of being a cishet white autistic man who's been able to hold down a job and survive, versus more marginalised autistic people. Will he go through a skill regression from this discovery, like most people seem to experience? And what kinds of skills will he lose? How will this impact positively and negatively his relationships with people or his job? Also, as a side note, like, this weird situationship they keep like referring to with the new mental health nurse, like, it makes no sense to me. I'm not getting it. She was very mean to him and made a lot of assumptions, and then like just kind of just started being nice to him out of nowhere, and he's just like accepting it. And like, I kind of feel like this could be another autism trait, the naivety and like gullibleness, or like the ignoring or missing of red flags in other people's behaviour. Like, she was literally going to report him. I know he might not have known that, but like, she was so hostile with him at the beginning and was so sure he was doing something wrong, which is great after the whole Patrick thing. And it was brought up in the article to like, how autistic does this sound, lads? Amid this difficult period for Dylan, he's found himself in what we're calling a situationship with mental health nurse Sophia. Do you think Dylan knows what it is? Will, the actor, laughed. This is such a maelstrom for him. He's using words I don't even know. What's a maelstrom? The canine grief he's going through because his dog recently just died, the workplace upheaval. He also had a colleague attempt suicide. He says Dylan's feel buffeted. Again, what? Somebody comes along who stops and takes a long, hard look at him, and I think he just sort of goes, come on then. Dylan would just be perplexed by the whole thing, he added, pondering over the possibility of Dylan and Sophia actually confronting their feelings for each other. And like, yeah, I am going to personally, even though I think there's a reasonably large age gap between Stevie and Dylan, I have a personal preference for them two as a relationship over him and Sophia. He's had such a terrible time with relationships. Wife cheated on him with someone he works with. Has been alone basically since then. He almost got with Faith at one point and was stolen by the same man who stole his wife. There was something else. There was somebody else as well, I'm sure. But I can't remember who it was now. But like, the previous nurse in charge, who was then shagging his mate instead. And then she went to prison, so at me, just give it up, you know? So like, yeah, my final word on this is to the BBC. Go on then. Give us a canon autistic doctor. I fucking dare you. It just generally feels like They are using the trend of lots of people now realising they're autistic, being diagnosed or self-diagnosing as like a way of either bringing in or keeping, bringing in new viewers or keeping maybe some bored viewers, or igniting some new interest in like a long-term character without actually planning to commit to it. They've used this possibility of him being autistic as part of a different plot line, and I've kind of just left it there. There hasn't been much acknowledgement or recognition, or any more like subtle moments for Dylan, or other people he's working with that kind of go, maybe he is autistic. Especially as well, like the main / only person who even knows about this, besides Patrick, who is now not in the show anymore, is Stevie. And Stevie is not exactly known as the kind of person to just like forget about something like that, or to, keep something to herself for the most part. However, at the moment she is very much wrapped up in her own other very, very separate plot line. So maybe that's why we haven't seen anything from her in particular. I don't think we've seen them interacting much together really in a while, at least especially since this main plot line where they were both doing everything they could to keep tabs on Patrick and to get rid of him or get him fired, etc., from his job role. They haven't really been around each other as much since that plot. Maybe he is like thinking about it, maybe he's trying to come to terms with this before he makes any decisions on what he's doing, blah blah blah. Or like there's not really so far seemingly a building up to something happening with this, and it's just sort of like, we'll wait and see, in case we're bored and we want to use autism as a different plot line to possibly not be great. Or just to go, roll jokes, he's not autistic, he's the fake autism that's also a different diagnosis apparently, that's really makes no sense. So yeah, it's frustrating. I feel autism baited at the moment because there's been no confirmation. I think it would be nice for the audience to at least know one way or another, and then the rest of it to be built around it. But like at the moment, I don't know if that's happening. It does sound like from this interview it may come back soon, especially maybe around or because of the possible relationship happening between Dylan and Sophia. But like there's just kind of not been any recognition or acknowledgement of it since. He was like, I've had my assessment, I've got the results. Anyway, bye. Just give me a canon autistic doctor who isn't the good doctor, please. Oh, it's also like current day, because the Grey's Anatomy one is a pretty old couple of episodes. Like, we need something more new and updated. Come on. Also, BBC, if you want to hire some new younger doctors or nurses who are also autistic to be part of the plot, I'm here, and I have experience being autistic because I'm autistic. I also have experience acting. Thank you. I'll be great. I'm just like always plugging, like, hey Casualty, hire me. You're one of my favourite shows. I would die to be a regular for a while. You also don't have any non-binary people on the show anymore. You don't have any non-binary people on the show anymore, so hire me. You'll be ticking multiple boxes. I'm also disabled, remember? I have other disabilities going on. I don't think any of your other doctors have disabilities anymore. No, I think they're all gone too. So anyway, want to tick some boxes? You can pay me. You can pay me. Anyway, that's my video for this week. It's kind of slagging off one of my favourite shows, but I do feel a little bit betrayed, honestly. A little bit betrayed by this, how it's been going so far. To be fair, I think people should engage critically with media they enjoy, because it can be very easy to ignore bad or shitty or like just generally lackluster parts of shows that they love. So that's me doing that right now. I'm engaging critically with a show I love, okay? If this man is not autistic in the next few weeks, I'm having a funeral, you know? Anyway, that's my video for this week. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, watch my other videos because the watch time is kind of the thing that we still have to do for partner. Anyway, I'll see you next week. Bye.